Hello, everybody. Welcome. We have a awesome conversation today. We are getting a chance to chat with Lisa, who is excitingly the artist that we have partnered with, collaborated with for the OG edition Threnum Shield Mint. So, Lisa, welcome. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for inviting me. And it's so early. I mean, I know this is recorded for later, but it's so early for me to ask you to be on here.
Well, it's no, I'm glad we got a chance to do it. We always want to make time. So I'm excited. This is obviously with what we're doing with our product, it is an NFT, it's a product, but the art aspect of it is it's a fun thing. It's really important for the security aspects and the identity aspects. And so, as we've been sort of ideating and building on this over the last year, um, the art component has always kind of been top of mind. And so when we got the chance to start working with you, it was just like, oh man, everything that we thought in our head, this is so next level to what we were envisioning. So I'm extremely blessed to have you here, and just stoked to get a chance for us to learn a little bit about kind of your background and your art history and how you got into NFTs and what NFTs you're liking, and then we can talk a little bit about the art of the mint. So let's kick it off there. If you could give everybody a quick kind of background about who you are, how you became an artist, sort of your CV, if you will, and we can get into it from there.
Awesome. So I was not an artist. Well, okay, so backstory. I think everyone's been an artist since they were a kid, right? Like every kid loves to draw. But then most people stop. And I just never really stopped. But it became more of a hobby or a side thing. Because when I went to school for business school, and that's what I have a
Okay.
degree in. I came out and I actually did work in technology for a large corporation for a handful of years, but I just didn't love it. I actually hated it. And I
Wow.
started picking up my art on the side again. And first, just showing at local craft fairs, in local stores and boutiques. And it just grew from there to the point where I said, I want to do this. I'm willing
Yeah.
to risk it. I was young enough that I was like dumb and or brave enough to like just say goodbye to the cushy corporate job. And I've been freelancing and selling my own work and doing art ever since. And that art career has taken me through every iteration you can imagine, from like sidewalk fairs to gallery shows to working, collaborating with companies to working with, with you guys in Web3
Yeah.
and NFTs. So it's been a
Yeah.
really fun ride.
That's awesome. So how, like, if you were to give a quick timeline, like when did you really start full time going into being an artist? What was that?
To reveal
How
my
long ago
age
was
here, but
that?
I've been doing this for definitely over a decade,
Wow.
more now.
Okay.
So I was working corporate for about like 5 years or so, and then it's been like a while that I've been doing art. Yeah,
Full time. That's amazing.
full
And
time.
for us non-art experts out there, how would you describe your style? Like what type of artist are you? I guess if you could put yourself in a box.
It's funny because I really do feel like my art is in a phase of transition, so it's
Okay.
hard for me to like pinpoint it at the moment. But before, I would say the last like 2 years or so, I was purely traditional. So paints, markers, watercolors. The subject matter has always kind of stayed the same. It's very like illustrative, childlike, pastels, girly, with just like a little touch of like sass and maybe, you know, irony or something. I like to make it a
Sure.
little bit interesting. Um, but then in the last like 2 years or so, for a long time I resisted going digitally because I felt like it was like cheating. But then I got my first like iPad and I got Photoshop and I started dabbling in it. And Procreate is what I don't know if you're familiar, but Procreate is like the
No.
tool that finally got me hooked onto digital because it just feels very intuitive
Okay.
going from traditional to more of a digital art. So now I'm trying to find the balance of like when to use digital, when to use traditional, when to merge the two. And I'm still
Sure.
exploring. So it's fun.
Is this is how naive I am. Is Procreate a software, or is that like an actual physical tablet thing that you
It's
use?
a
No, it's a
software and you only use it I believe it's only available on iPads, so you kinda
okay,
have to got the combo of the 2, but that was, like, the final combo that, like, made it click for me.
for sure. What was the so if you're doing a lot of like hand drawn, hand painted art. How weird was it kind of going to like the stylus and iPad thing that
Oh,
you're
so weird, and I think it's because when I first tried, well, I went the what everyone does what all the professionals use, right? They use Adobe, and they use Photoshop, and they use
sure.
Illustrator, and it can be very, like, scary because it's those tools are so strong, but they're so complex that it takes it's a steep learning curve, and then with Illustrator, you're drawing with, you know, shoot, the words escaping my mind, but you're drawing with, like, lines and, like, basically code. So,
Yeah.
it's not intuitive if you have a traditional background. It was really with Procreate, it's you're kinda like drawing just on a tablet, like, you pick the brush, it feels like a watercolor brush, and you use a stylus, and then the marks kinda look similar, and, still figuring it out. It did feel a little weird at first, but you kinda get used
Yeah.
to it.
That's that it is interesting, and every time I like see someone doing some intricate artwork on an iPad, I'm like, God, that just looks so. It looks very cumbersome almost. It looks kind of counterintuitive to what you would expect to be able to do, and
Mhm,
so it's very impressive for sure. And I think us those that can't do but appreciate are like very,
mhm.
very 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 cool. So, how much of your art, if you were to just throw a percentage at it, are you doing sort of still hand drawn, hand painted versus the digital? What's the split look like for you these days?
I would say currently it's probably like 75% digital,
Oh
and
wow,
25% traditional. I know, and I feel like that's what happens with me. Before it was all traditional, now it's almost like all digital, and then I'm feeling the pull to like do more traditional again. So it's probably always gonna be like an ebb and flow. Yeah.
sure, sure. That creative process and the creativity and the germs of the idea, I'm sure, will pull you in
Mhm.
different ways, and those inspirations will shine through in different mediums. But when you started doing more digital art, was this around the time of NFTs? Was that a catalyst for you wanting to do digital art? Like, why transition? And then let's chat about how you got into the NFT space.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't it did actually kind of coincide from when I,
Okay,
like, started getting my actual technical, like, tools together and figuring out how to use them, and then when I started getting interested in NFTs. It did coincide. I don't know if one was the reason for the other, but, because I think I would have picked up digital art anyways. I think I was just kinda getting naturally getting there.
yeah,
But I was really piqued by NFTs because it was in that was it last year, summer, when it was really making the rounds in the news cycle?
JPEG summer, yeah,
Oh, yeah, JPEG Summer, there we go. And I was just like, "What is this?" How are artists making money off of this? You're hearing all these, like, crazy wild stories, and I'm like, "Okay,
right,
let me learn about it." And it piqued my interest, and, um I guess it worked together because I was like, I wanna make a handful of NFTs. I wanna explore. I wanna see what this space is about. But I want it to be a very different look than what
mm,
I've traditionally done. Partially because I was from my researching in NFTs, there was a certain look. There was a different kind of a vibe that was going on in the Web3 space. And I think part of it was also like I wasn't sure if I loved the Web3 space yet. I wasn't sure what was going on. So in case
yeah,
like it backfired on me, I wanted to feel like there's just a little degree of separation.
sure,
So I leaned
reasonable.
hard into like digital tools for my NFTs. I learned how to animate them a little bit just so I could make them, there was movement in them, which I think was interesting and would lend well to, that whole new medium of NFTs.
Sure.
Um, so I think getting into NFTs really did like fast forward my trajectory of like just leaning hard into digital art and how to create it and how to make them look a little different. And then
Yeah,
now I'm sure it's influenced my style. I'm sure it has.
right.
Yeah.
I would imagine so. So let me ask you a question. When you started getting in NFTs, did you start off by appreciating and like minting some, or did you jump in to say, I'm going to start on the creative side and go from there? Like, what was the first NFT that you got involved with? Maybe that's the other follow up part of this
Well, I will
question.
tell you that the first NFT, what was it that I purchased or minted
Yeah.
was, can I say? I don't know. It
If
was,
you don't want to say, you can keep that a
oh, I
secret.
don't mind. It was Wow Pixies, and
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar at all with them.
No.
A smaller, and what drew me in was because it was also the time when there were a lot of women-led projects, and that was
Hmm.
becoming a big thing, like women-led projects and projects that featured PFPs that had women in them. And so that was one I landed on that was women PFPs, and the team had a really cool woman on it, and they were promoting. They were a DAO that wanted to invest in other women-led projects, and so that intrigued me because like it felt safer, like a little safer niche to get into in the Web3 space. So that
Sure.
was the first one I got into, and from there, I don't know, I think I was just experimenting and drawing digitally. I was still learning it and figuring out what a style was. I posted a few onto Twitter. I made a whole brand new Twitter account because again,
Okay.
I was sure, so I wanted that degree of separation. Um, and I think this is gonna lead into like a next question, but I posted a little bit of my work on that new Twitter account I made. Someone from Hug, Debbie, noticed it. I probably tagged her in one, or maybe I commented on some Hug post, and we connected just through like the few samples I had thrown up there. And that's how I was invited to be the artist of the Hug Mint, which
Wow.
was amazing and I really think honestly like helped launch me into the Web3 space. Like just personally like encouraged me to go in there and then also
Yeah.
just getting a few more eyeballs onto my work.
For sure. Can you share a little bit of story around that project and because that was,
Mm.
for from what I know, that really was your kind of seminal first main big project that you were involved with. What did that look like? What was the sort of the creative idea? How did you land on the final? Because the art is really interesting. There's quite a variety of different from like what's on OpenSea that I can see it at this point. There's quite a nice variety. So how did you land on that? What was that process like?
Yeah, so the Hug, I was working with Debbie Soon and also Randy Zuckerberg, and they both already had ideas, so when we started working together, they knew that their company's called The Hug. They wanted images that represented hugs in certain ways, and we brainstormed, what that could mean, whether it was like a straightforward characters hugging or a pun on a hug. So there's one set that's like a pug hug that came out of some of that brainstorming,
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, it was a little bit challenging just kinda, like, figuring out, different I think it ended up being 11 different, versions of hugs, so it was hard figuring out that, but then also, like, okay, how do we make this work visually? And then I don't know if you're familiar, but their hug is also, like every hug is split into 2, so then you have to figure out visually, like, how do you make it look interesting when they're connected together, but
Right.
then when they stand alone as a half, how does that work? And then they wanted them animated. So then
Right.
everything that needed to be animated in a little way. And so it was a learning process, I think, for everyone, but I think we were happy with the final product. The initial launch went very well, and it was great feedback from people who saw the art, and some really connected with it. So it was a really great, like, intro for me, even, like, working with a project in Web3,
Yeah.
entering this Web3. And
Yeah.
then oh, I was gonna
Sorry.
say, sorry, my allergies are acting up, but, I
That's
was
okay.
gonna say, right before the Hug launch, when Randy and Debbie were kinda helping promote me and my work and my involvement with them, I had that business background. I strategically wanted to use that traction, and so I, like, very fairly quickly create 3 illustrations that were gonna be the beginning of my Gimme Space collection, and I minted those out, and they sold out, like, right away. Randy picked one of them up,
Amazing.
and that's also how I kinda launched my personal collection, alongside this Hug collection.
Yeah. That's crazy. So you said something that sparked a question in my head, and this is something that we were going through with Armit, which is you mentioned with the hugs that there were two designs or two NFTs that would go
Mhm.
together. And with us having, the different layers and how that generates and how did you learn, for lack of a better term, how did you learn really how to do that in a visually pleasing way, but also in a way that just works together? Was it a lot of trial and error? Was it sort of you learned a framework for how to set things up that they would work when they're either done generatively or they're put together? What was that framework that you built for making that
Well,
actually happen?
with the Hug, it wasn't generative,
Sure,
so it
sure.
was just 11, like, finished images that were then, like, basically split in half so that we had a pair for each 11, so 22 separate images that were gonna happen. So they
Gotcha.
didn't do generative. For
Sure.
yours, though, for 3num, it is generative, so and I'm currently, like, still fine tuning it, So to make it work, at least for me, I don't know how other artists have done this. It is working in layers. That is something that if you're not familiar with digital art, it takes a little bit. You know, the layers. It's kind of like drawing on transparency and then drawing on another transparency and kind of stacking them all together to build that final image.
Sure.
And so for us, for ours, it would be like one transparency is that shield. And I don't know if we've talked about that with the project about how it's like you're branding the shield for Threnum and then the features and the traits that are going to layer on top of it. So it's really important to make sure while I'm making these traits that in whatever combination that they still look good,
Yeah.
that they layer in an aesthetic way. It does take some tweaking. I'm still tweaking them, fine tuning them, but I think it's also why for our project, and I don't know if you want me to talk about some of the references that we've pulled. Um, we wanted it kind of an aged, kind of a paper ephemera look to it, which
Sure.
me allows me just a little bit of wiggle room because it does look intentionally not perfect, a little
Right.
aged, a little bit like cut out of paper or something, so that when they layer, I mean, I'm making them look good, but like it does also intentionally give me that little wiggle room so that if there are imperfections, it's okay because
Right.
it's meant to look hand drawn, handmade, cut out of paper or pieced together and then aged and roughed up just a little bit. So,
Yeah. Well, having seen the actual designs, I can confirm they look incredible. They don't just look good. So all of those, call them sort of natural looking elements to them, play
mhm.
together so incredibly. When people get a chance to mint these, I think they're going to be just be over the moon. But let's talk a little bit. We'll move into talking about the three num shields. And so, for kind of context and background for folks, we went through a bunch of different ideas in just terms of the different styles, like the feeling that we want to convey and some of the emotional elements. And then you really pulled from a lot of different inspirations. Can you talk? People haven't seen them yet. We will be sharing them soon. But can you kind of talk
Mm.
about some of those inspirations that went into your creativity and sort of the design elements for the shields that we're launching?
Oh, absolutely. So, when I first read your brief and it was like you guys wanted to do a shield and you did have, I mean, thankfully you did have kind of like a what did you call it? Like a few samples pulled out, like a lookbook
Yeah,
kind of thing.
sure.
Pulled out.
A rough lookbook, but one,
Yes.
yeah,
No, it was a decent one of just like you had pulled things like images that y'all were kind of feeling and inspired by, and I knew it was a shield, so I had something to work from. It wasn't like just pulling it out of thin air. I will say though, like even just the shield and like having a face on the shield at first was kind of a challenge for me. I'm like, how is that gonna work?
right,
How would that? How could I make that look right? And in my brain, I was going through all the different possibilities from making it look like a very realistic shield, which I mean, admittedly, I don't know if I would have been the best person for that. And then, working like more stylized and maybe an abstract kind of a shield, which is kind of where I landed. Um, and then I started doing a lot of research and just Googling like shields and I don't know, like I when I thought shields and faces, I just and looking at your look sheet, I was immediately already thinking, like, connecting the dots of, like, something kinda traditional looking, something that pulled maybe, like, historical, because shields, I mean, I don't know, we don't really use shields too much these days, so it
sure,
is kind of a historical tool.
sure,
In researching, I landed and I remember what kind of weird tangent led me down this Google hole. I really landed on Chinese opera masks and makeup because they have very graphic, eye markings, very vivid and abstract, like mouth, and just it's a whole vibe. And then
yeah,
I thought those features, those exaggerated features, could just lend really well to being displayed on top of a shield. So pulled a lot from there. While I kept researching, I also like those features that I was drawing from Chinese opera masks also reminded me of lucha libre masks, and so it just started kinda pulling references from both points, which makes sense because I am Chinese, I'm from the South, like, I'm from South Texas, and we have a lot of, like, these combined cultures here, um, and I don't know, I just was really excited by that possibility and just started sketching and drawing colors from the different combos and features, and they just seem to work. And I think
Yeah.
you guys agreed, so we were on the
They
same
work
page.
so well. It's I have a little bit of a struggle because I know I'm talking about something that other folks haven't referenced yet, but when they do, once it's out, this'll
It'll
you
make
can come
sense.
back and reference this and you'll say they were onto something. They knew what they were talking about.
Mm,
Yeah, I they are phenomenal, and everybody that we've shown them to, on our team and some of our advisors, Montana, everybody thought, oh my god, these are just phenomenal, next level
mhm,
great. And one of the things that's really interesting is that you talk about the facial components, and so we kind of use these terms like anthropomorphic and as
mhm,
part of the kind of the element. And what was really fascinating was that the 3 num shield, there's sort of some inherent utility around them being kind of this protector, like it shields your identity, and in that sense it's sort of pseudonymous, or it is pseudonymous I should say. And so it's when we were initially thinking about shields and faces, the sort of mass component, it didn't initially find its way into the vocabulary, but it ended up being so synergistic and so perfect, given the fact that what we're doing is providing sort of a way to protect your identity, given all the problems related to phone numbers and how that can dox you and all these
mhm.
things. And so it ended
Mm,
up being so perfect in that sense, because what you've created is very on brand, if you will, with all of the features that our solution actually offers. And it's funny how that came somewhat organically out of just your research and your stylistic expertise. But it just really worked. And so I love that the final product is a visual representation of all the things we actually provide from a value side. So I just think that's cool. I hope other people could appreciate that, or that they'll say, wow, there's so many, it all kind of interconnects. Like, it was very thoughtful. It was very sort of strategic in that sense.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, they look really good. I can't stop saying it. So was there any, as you were going through the creative and design process, were there any things that you thought, oh, like this is, and I know again we're sort of referencing something folks can't see, but was there something where you had like oh, this is going to be really cool, like whether it was some of your artist, inspired, people don't know what we're referencing, right? But there's some
Right.
shield elements that were solely you just took a creative stab at. Like, was there any kind of aha moments when you were doing that you said, oh, this is something I'm going to kind of integrate or include?
Um, like specific traits and features or
Yeah, just anything
cumulative?
related to like the opera background or like the
Yeah.
lucha libre things. Is there something you're
I
like, "Oh,
will
this is."
yeah. I will say when I hit on the Chinese opera background, I was like, "Yes." Like, that was like lightning bolt because it made sense to me. It made sense to me personally. And then I could like aesthetically it made sense. So it was just kinda like, that makes sense to me. Aha, that would look right on a shield because you can't draw realistic features, like facial features on a shield. That would look probably creepy. And then you
Yeah,
can't draw, like a certain aesthetic, like if it's too cutesy or whatever. So when I landed on like this kind of graphic um features, I don't know how to describe it. Like it just made sense.
yeah,
That it could look like tough, but also protective. It could have these kind of like features that looked, I don't know, just giving off the vibe, I think, that, the
yeah,
shield protecting the toughness, the strength, the proudness, just all that stuff. It
yeah,
made sense. It wasn't leaning too cutesy or, too silly or too realistic and creepy or anything like that. And it worked. The other one I think that made me go, yes, that needs to be in there. And I was just glad you guys agreed, was that kind of aged look
mm,
um, that we're kind of applying this, aged finish look to these designs. Because initially, my proposed design was a very like flat, straightforward colors, very clean, very minimalist. I was even thinking like it works well for Web3. It's a little closer to what we're seeing out there, where everything looks very like clean, flat, straight colors, maybe even more modern, more new and shiny. Um, but in order to make it kinda stand out, and also
mhm,
when I was drawing from the references that I was looking at, which were more vintage and antique, opera masks and these lucha libre, like so these opera masks, like, cards that I found on the internet that were very inspiring, and then these lucha libre old posters that, were printed, and seen some things and now have wrinkles in them. Like those
Yeah,
were the references I was pulling from. So I was like, well, why don't I make it look like that? So when I applied this kind of aged fuzziness over the image, I was like, okay, that's what makes it look good. Like that's how it's pulling it all together. And I'm just glad you guys agreed because
yeah,
the shield with these historical references and then the colors looking shiny and new, I guess it just didn't make sense.
sure.
But with the colors looking more aged and muted and it worked better, I think. So
100%. And I remember specifically when you sent us the 2 examples, you're like, "Here's sort of the clean, sort of modern straight
mm,
edge look, and then here's this other idea." And instantaneously, we were all drawn to that. Like, it was so unique, and it fit more, right? Like, when you
yeah,
think about both a shield and a lot of the context that sort of goes into the design elements, it just made sense, and I think it made it very cohesive and sort of a coherent look, which, again, when people see it, I think they're gonna be super,
thank
super
you.
ecstatic.
And
So
I think it doesn't hurt that it helps it stand out a little bit more from what we're used to seeing out there. So
yeah, yeah.
and if
No, we love being unique and unique in a way that is visually and aesthetically pleasing. So that's always it's always a win-win. Um, very good. Well, Lisa, we are ecstatic to be able to work with you and get to do this. I will give a quick plug that if you have not joined, we do have our allow list. We are at the point of we've hit our max. However, there's sort of an overflow so that if someone does not end up joining the mint, that'll be prioritized. So we encourage everybody to go on and join that allow list so that you have a potential shot at getting your OG edition 3 shield done by Lisa, because this is going to be it. Once they mint out, that's it. There will not be any more of these incredible shields. So that's our quick little shameless plug. But where can people follow you? Like Twitter handle, what's your website? Let's make sure we get that in there so folks can stay up to date with what you're doing.
yeah, I mean, I have a couple of NFTs out there on OpenSea. I do have, some floating out there. You can find them linked from my NFT specific Twitter handle, which is Lisa Chow NFT. But if you just want like a broader look at what I'm doing in my art, even outside of Web3, I have a website, lisachow.art.com, where you can just connect to me. Instagram's linked there, my Twitter's. Yeah, is the easiest place to find me.
Perfect. We'll make sure that people go visit. And if you are a NFT project that does want to work with an incredible artist who makes the process unbelievably easy, and for folks that are somewhat design challenged, artistically challenged, working with Lisa is like the best it's going to get. So if you're another NFT project out there, and make sure you hit her up because you will
Well,
not be disappointed.
I'll say you guys are smooth clients too. Y'all are pretty easy to work with. You know what you
Well,
want, you like what you like.
that's yeah, we definitely try to do our best to make that as easy as possible within within reason, right? So cool. Well, hey Lisa, thank you so much. I'm glad we got a chance to do this. I'm really excited for the collection to drop. I cannot wait to mint my 3 shield. I think everybody is sort of in the same boat there. So we'll wrap it up there. Just wanted to thank you again, and we'll see those shields when they mint.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Perfect. Take care, Lisa.
You too.